again.
Okay. This is February 10th, 1992, the day before your 70th birthday. And so it's very important that we do this. And I've been wanting to ask you these questions for a long time and to get it documented so that you could share it for a long time. The first thing I want to ask each of you is about your lives before the war. I'm going to be very specific about it. I'm going to ask you first to just, Dad, to talk about your grandparents. Who they were, tell me about them. Just your grandparents.
From my mother's side, my grandfather was a shochet, kosher. Kosher shochet, that means, ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother was a housewife.
What were their names, Dad?
My grandfather was Mendel Greenberg, and my grandmother was Malke Greenberg. And they had, besides my grandfather being a shochet in the little town, he was a very religious individual. Friday afternoon, when he was going to shul, if it was after 5 o'clock, and any store was open, he just knocked the windows out. He was so religious. And wearing a streimel, I don't know if you know what that is. It's that special Jewish hat what they wore, and a beard and payas, and I used to go with him to shul because he really admired me, because he usually because I was real with him in that religious upbringing.
Okay. Now go on to Grandpa and Grandma. Talk about your father and your mother.
From father's side, my grandfather was a dealer by a big baron, because Poland had barons. And whatever the baron, he was a businessman, whatever the baron had for sale, my grandfather, he was like a broker. He brought in people if the baron had to sell cattle, or sheep, or corn, or wheat, or any kind of wood, or whatever it was. I mean, he was the first man that brought in the middle people to buy it.
And what was his name?
His name was Israel Dorfman.
Okay.
My grandmother was a housewife, but she really was involved in the business. She was a very pretty woman, and she really was involved, and her name was Kreidel. This is you name after her, her Kreidel Dorfman, and they made a pretty good living, because anything what that baron had to sell went through my grandfathers.
Okay. Okay, you just told me about your grandparents. Tell me about your father and mother.
My father was the same thing involved with my grandfather Israel, dealing, for example, the same thing with the baron. He was like, following up what grandfather didn't do, dealing with cattle. We were butcher's home, like, for example, not just we were kosher butchers, but not just kosher butchers. We were dealing with the government. All the hinds, which this was not kosher, the fronts were used for kosher, and the hinds we were selling to the army, to the government. And we were doing pretty well. Mom was a housewife, but she still in all was a hard worker. She owned her own little store, and every Tuesday, I used to do a lot of work with her. Besides having the store, a grocery store. Everything besides the meats and so forth. But she had a little grocery store, and then every Tuesday, the farmers used to bring in corn, wheat, and she exchanged that corn and wheat for flour. and she could pick up 100 kilo like nothing. A very strong woman. I don't know about my height, but she was probably 5 inches taller than I am, 4 or 5 inches. But my father was not, you know, he was taller than I am, but still in all, she was a very tremendous, hard-working woman.
And what were their full names?
The full names, Moishe, was my father's name. My mother's name was Glicka, which your sister is named after. Glicka means glick. Glick in Hebrew means prosperous.
And tell me about your brothers and sisters. Tell me how many brothers and sisters you had. What are their names?
I had 2 brothers and 1 little sister. Which this, when I talk about, that really hurts me. My younger brother was 7 years old. My younger little brother was 5. They were 2 years apart.
And their names, yeah?
In Kalmar, Israel was 1. He was named after, because my grandfather passed away, so he was named after my grandfather. The other one was Kalmar. Kalmar was named after an uncle, but was a shoichet. Same thing in a town. He was named after him. In Ruchel was my little sister's name, and she was 3 years old.
I was with you, so I know that you were born in Glowaczow. Just describe Glowaczow for me. Describe the town for me.
Glowaczow was a town of about 2,500 people. I would say mostly farming. In a lot of, I would say, butchers, because it was 60 kilometers from Warsaw, and we were under Vistula, the best land Poland possesses, we were on it. And there was a lot of farming, a lot of cattle, a lot of wheat and everything else. So I would say that the town itself was a prosperous town.
What did it look like, Dad?
It looked...
Like it was built around a square. I'm thinking about
Yes,
how
it
you
was,
got-
I'll tell you, all the square, the church was approximately like, in one corner was the church. And all around the church, you know, there was like a market, you know, like you see here, what do you call it? But they're selling all kind of stuff, what do you call it?
You mean in New York?
No, a flea market.
Oh, okay.
And all around was mostly all the Jewish stores. And the same thing, the Gentiles having, but a lot of, I mean, there was a town of a big meat industry, in corn and wheat. And the Jews, like any place else in Poland, very religious. Like I say, as much as I was involved in my family in religious upbringing, I was already a little rebel that time.
Dad, now I know Mom always talks about it, and we'll get to her talking about Lodz, but she always talks about being from the city and that you were from the sticks.
That's right.
I mean, did they have, you didn't have indoor plumbing, you didn't have...
We didn't have any indoor plumbing. We had 2 cows, which I milked them. I was 7, 8 years old, 10 years old. I milked them by myself and mother. We were like farmers. We were farmers. We had our own potatoes. We had our own piece of land. We had 25 acres of land, which we grew everything under, you know. And like I say, we had horses. We had 2 horses. Because there was horse and wagon, there was no cars.
Right.
There was like here, some towns, what I have seen after the war was not, I mean, all over Europe, it was the same thing like we lived in our hometown. But we were very happy, because why? We had everything we wanted. I mean, if it comes to food, but clothing and anything else, who cared?
Okay. Mom, go back. Tell me about your grandparents. tell me their names. Tell me a
My
little bit about them.
mother's father and mother, they lived in Kozienice, because my mother came from Kozienice. And my grandmother had a bakery, and her name was Hinder, Heidi, like you. And my grandfather never worked because he always studied the Talmud. And he was one like a judge in the city and the Jewish religion. They would come and ask him to solve a problem. He would be the one to, the Torah they called it, I don't know what they call it here.
Yeah.
That's the kind of person he was. And my mother came from, there were 7 kids, and they're all gone. My father's side, they lived in Lodz. My grandmother had a store which I showed it to you when we were in Poland.
That was the address. Which address was that?
34 Legionów.
Right, okay.
And she had a store, and her name was Martu. And my grandfather, he passed away earlier, before the war, and his name was Meiler. And also my father had brothers and 1 sister. And my mother and father was Yoel and Esther. We were 6 of us. And, 2 brothers and a sister, and they're gone.
It'll just help to remember that that's really why you're doing this. Do you know what I mean? It's not to be a personal torture.
Yeah,
it's
that's
so that your
right.
grandchildren will know. Do you know what I mean? They're young, and I think if you just remember that, it will make it easier. I don't want you to relive it while you're doing this. I know this is really hard. You know what I'm saying? But just try to remember if you can. It might make it easier to not. You don't have to relive every minute. You can try to. I know this is really hard, but you're the only one who knows this. Maybe try not to see them so vividly. Just.
I have 2 sisters alive. They lived through the war in Auschwitz.
And their names?
Franca and Rosa.
Okay.
And you want to go on with what? What do you want me to say now?
Can you just tell me? Can you tell me your brother and sister's names?
Yeah, my one brother's name was Menashe, one was Baelish, and my sister's name was Mindel.
Okay.
My father was in the junk business.
Uh-huh.
We lived in Lodz, in a big city. We did have indoor plumbing, and it was a big city, was an industrial city, and was a different life than where Dad comes from.
Uh-huh.
And my father was in junk business, you know, glass, iron, and
Scraps.
Scraps, yeah, scrap business, yeah. And my mother used to help him in the business.
Tell me about a typical day in Lodz for you. At that time, right before the war broke out, how old were you?
I was 15 years old when the war broke out, and I had just finished high school. Not high school, I mean the 7th grade. For us, it was not 8th grade. It wasn't high school. And we were supposed to go to Israel, and we had a certificate to go to Israel. So we had to learn a trade. So Tirosa and I,
Wait, just don't talk to me.
and Tirosa and I went, and we went to learn how to sew, on a sewing machine, men's shirts.
Uh-huh.
And then the war broke out, and we couldn't go, so we didn't go.
If you were going to remember, you're always telling me,
Yeah.
you know, like when you think back, if you were to think back to something that you remember from Lodz, I know you used to talk about the wafers, like why you like ice cream cones so much. Or just something you remember. You go back, you said, oh, this used to be. Tell me something, the
Yeah,
memories
when we
that you
used
have.
to go to school, and we used to had to take lunch along, a sandwich. So I remember that we got a roll, and we put some halva in. This was a treat, because who could afford all the time to buy this? Or to get for 1 penny, we got to buy a piece of like it was like not a cone, but made like a wafer, yeah. for 1 penny. So this was really something. I used to love to buy this because I liked it. And I used to help a lot in the house. You know, my mother worked, and I used to help her out in the house and to take care of the other children, you know, the younger ones. And we were very happy. We didn't have a lot, but we were very happy because we were together.
And your mother was very religious too.
Yes, my parents were religious, but not fanatics, but they were religious, yeah, they were. And we were raised in a very religious home. I mean, I was raised that I cannot comb my hair on Shabbos because my hand's going to fall off. That's the way I was raised. But after this war, I mean, I changed a little.
Dad, you always talk about some of the, you said earlier you were a rebel. What are some of the things that you did that made you say that you were a rebel?
What I did, because, like I say, we were religious. We used to wear those Jewish, those little black hats. You probably know what I'm talking about. And in my home little town, most of the Jewish kids did not go to public schools.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I finished the 7 classes. I finished 1937, 38. I finished the whole 7 classes. We were probably maybe, because half of the town was Jewish. If it was 2,500 people, there was half and half, you know, between the Polish people and the Jewish people.
So you were one of the few.
And I was one of the few, probably maybe a dozen kids that we were going to. In the rebel, what I meant, I was involved, like you are right now, involved in dancing and performing in school. I was always involved. I was the choreographer, I was the writer, I was doing everything. And that's why I stayed away a lot from going to the synagogue. If I could hide myself and not go to the synagogue, I didn't go. So my father used to catch me by the ear like this. But like I say, not that I was a rebel, but I just wanted to be modern. I didn't like that. Why should I look different than any other kids? I was just as capable, just as good. But why did I have to wear the black hat and the long thing? What for? What is it? People could see me on the street, you know. I mean, I was completely different. And to me, this was a disgrace. I didn't like it.
Right. Dad, could you just tell the outhouse story so that we have it for all time? Do you remember the story you told me? What you guys did to the rabbi?
Oh, yeah. And this was the group. This was the group. We had you know, all the plumbing and everything else outside. We were going to school, you know, to a rabbinical school at night, because in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, I got up 6. 6 I used to walk around on the cows, cut grass, this and that, cook potatoes for the, you know. But then I went to school from 8 to 1 to the public school, then come home at 1 or 2, worked in the house for a couple hours, and then about 4 o'clock I went to Ghetto, like they called it. I went to Ghetto, and there we were until 8 o'clock at night. So in that rabbi, you know, those teachers were just murder. You know what, if you didn't know, they hit you over the head, they pulled you, my ears should have been like, I don't know, because I always was pulled by the ears. So I used to tell them, pull me that I should grow. You know? This he didn't do. And listen, and there was in a little room, you know, but so he had to go out, you know, every time he had to go to take a leak or whatever, he had to go outside. There was nothing inside. And we knew that, and there was that a little from wood made a toilet, you know, that house. Yeah, that house. So he went in there, and we were just about, we had to go home already. The special house, he says, okay, it's 10 o'clock, whatever, you got to go home. We were waiting outside to see if he is going to go into that toilet. He went in there, and always he had, you know, there was a lock. You know, he took the lock off and went in there and sit there. So when he was already all set to go, We went like quietly, we locked the lock, and we threw the whole damn thing like this. You see, it was just like this sitting outside that little shed. It was a little shed. We threw the whole shed. He couldn't get out. He made so much noise. So who did he holler at? Like he picked, he said, oh, the Goyim, that not the Jews, but the Goyim did it, and this was us. And believe me, in the next morning, the whole city was upside down that the Goyim took the shed with the rabbi. And that wasn't true. But we wouldn't say nothing. We used to take, there was the stores and they had some signs. So we used to take up a sign from a grocery store and put it on a meat store. We used to take signs from shoemakers, put it on a tailor's store. But we didn't use, we used to run around with the police. Oh my God.
We'll edit this version so when they're older they'll get to hear this, Dad.
Oh my God. I was really a tough one.
I see where my daughter gets her actions. Anyway, Mom, tell us how you knew the war broke out. How did it break out for you? Where were you? What happened?
We were in Lodz, and it was in September. And we got up in the morning, we opened up the curtains, and we saw German in Lodz.
Did you know it was coming before this? Did you?
We knew, but we figured that they're going to come. We didn't know they're going to come. It's just so fast everything went that we heard it was going on, but...
When was this? When was this?
In September of 1939.
Okay.
And we didn't have a radio. We didn't know. There was no paper that day. We couldn't find out. But we went down. We saw the Germans with the tanks were running to the streets. And we lived you saw where we lived. And right going straight down, there was a big, like a square.
A market?
No, not a market, a square, the Platz Halera. And we saw there were Jews picked out with beards, with payers, and they were cutting beards. The same first day, right away, the first day. I mean, when we woke up the next, whenever they came in.
They cut their beards?
They cut their beards, and they cut their payers, and we saw it was no good, and then they start saying the Jews cannot go out, the Jews have to stay in the house, and the Jews going to go to work. And everybody thought, we go to work and it's going to be okay. But as the time went on, we saw that it was no good because they were hanging Jews in the streets, and they were killing them right in front of everybody. So my mother decided, the people were saying, if you take the kids to a small town, they're going to be safe. So we stayed still in Lodz for about 6-7 weeks because the beginning of December, my mother took us to Kozienice, my two brothers and my sister and myself. So we took a wagon, a horse, and the wagon she put clothes on and some quilt covers, to help us what to cover ourselves with. We went to Kozienice, to my grandmother.
How long a journey was it to get there?
I don't know, 6 days.
A week.
8 days. It was a long way. And this was winter time.
Who took you?
It was a Polak that took us. And my mother went with us. And after that, she went back to Lodz because my father was left there, and until Rosa and Franca were left there. So when we got to Kozienice, so it was already end of December. In 1940, they closed up Kozienice Ghetto. We had to go into a ghetto. So we got a little room someplace, and the 4 of us lived there. And I was learning how to be a nurse, and I worked in a hospital. And I had an uncle in a small town. He had no children. He was very wealthy there. So he came and he said, give me the kids. I'll save them there because no one's going to bother me. I never had any argument with anyone. And I'm sure all my friends the Polish friends are going to save us. The first ones, they went. So he took them there. And I don't know how long they lived there. I couldn't tell you. I don't know. But when they took all the people, all the Jews out from that area, they went to Blenka.
And where was that? Where was he?
This was in Hotkov.
And what was his name? Do you know the uncle's name?
Weintraub.
It was Weintraub.
Weintraub, too, yeah. And
It was about 15 kilometers away from us.
so when I stayed in the ghetto, and I worked in the hospital. And one incident I'll never forget, when I worked in the hospital, there was an old man laying there. He was very, very sick, and no one wanted to go, and he was making on himself. He was so dirty and everything. I went over one night, was in the afternoon shift, and I took him off the bed. I washed him, I cleaned him up, and he said to me, I want to tell you one thing. You're going to live through this war, and you're going to be very well off for that, what you did to me. I'll never forget the sound, what he said to me. It's still, every time I think about it, it rings in my ears.
You were also sick when you worked at the hospital.
Yeah, and I had typhus. And I didn't go into the hospital because I knew if I go into the hospital, they send me right away. I stayed home, and some friends of mine were coming in and helping me. And I got out of it. You know, it took a long time, but I got better. And they covered for me in the hospital, so no one knew that I was missing. So and then in 1942, I had an attack of appendicitis. And they rushed me to the hospital, and they operated on me. And this was just about 2 days before all the Jews were taken out from Kozienice.
From the ghetto.
And at night, I heard they were saying, the nurses, that the Jews are going to be evacuated like the next day, tonight. Tonight that we're talking about it. And they were talking also, the Jews that are in the hospital, they're going to be all killed. So I got out. This was my second day after the surgery. I still had the clamps in my stomach. You know, they had those clamps. And I knew if I go left, I'm going to go into the city. I had to go right. So I went out, and I walked and walked and walked, and until I couldn't walk, and I saw a big barn. So I figured I'd go in and lay down there. Whatever it's going to be, it's going to be. And I fell asleep there. And the next morning, they brought, there was a camp there. And they brought in the Jews, a lot of them that I knew from the city. And then they made a selection. Who's going to go, who's not going to go, who's going to go to Binka, who's going to go to work. I was lucky. Well, how, what, I couldn't tell you why. They put me to the right. I barely could walk, but they put me to the right. And I went to the right, and I went to camp.
Which camp did you?
I went to Gorzyczki, and I was
A walking camp.
digging ditches. For no reason. There was nothing, there was no, I don't know why they were digging him, just to make us work. We were there six weeks in that camp. And my incision was open all the time, and it was draining, and I had pus coming out. I was very, very uncomfortable, very sick. But I kept on working. I didn't say anything to anybody, and no one could help me anyways. Then we got into Kozienice.
But talk about the woman. There was a woman that helped you.
Yeah, that's what I'm coming to.
It's a different camp.
When I came to Kozienice, the woman, my couple, was a German woman, and she was a very good person. And she got to like me, and I spoke German. That's helped me a lot. And I said, and I was talking. She was walking by our tables where we were working with ammunition, and she said to me, you know, I would like to take you home for one day. I said, I cannot go out here. They will kill me. She said, don't worry about it. I'll make arrangement for you to come out. And I looked a lot like, I have pictures of her. I never showed you the pictures of her?
No.
And she said, you look a lot like me, and I'll give you my passport. And they will not, once you walk with me, you'll be okay. She did take me home. And she made the bathtub, and I went to take a bath, and I figured, now I have an opportunity to tell her what's wrong with me. And I told her. And from that time on, she brought me gauze, she brought me stuff that I can clean up my incision. And it healed up. You know, after a while it healed up, but, I started knitting for her. Mm-hmm. And she was bringing me some sandwiches. But she was bringing me ham sandwiches, and I didn't eat ham. I used to give it to my girlfriend, Rafalovich, which you remember which girlfriend? I used to, because she had to do with her lungs, I gave it to her because I figured she'd be safe if she eats that, you know. And we were there from 1942 till 1944. No, 1943, or end of 43. Then they took us to Częstochow.
Was she the woman? Did they shave the heads in the in?
No. My hair was always clean.
But wasn't she?
Not this.
Wasn't she the same woman that told you that if you washed your hair with urine?
Yeah, that's what I did. She told me, and I did, and I never had lice or anything. So my hair wasn't shaved. But whoever they found lice, they did shave it. But she helped me. She did, and then she also came to Częstochow with us.
What was her name? Do you remember?
Gertrude Hoffman. And in Częstochow,
Nice woman.
the Lagerführer was her boyfriend. And she had a child with him. And I knit for her, and I knit for the baby. And that Lagerführer was so good to us. He was a very good Lagerführer. In fact, when they called him to prosecute him, I testified for him. Remember
After the
him?
war, yeah.
After the war? Because he really was he just was an SS because, I mean, you know, you had to be an SS. But he didn't do any harm to us. Whatever he could help us, he did. And she said to us when the war almost was over, she said, do not leave this camp. No matter what, you hide in the camp because we lost the war. But don't say anything to anybody that I told you. Just tell your friends, stay where you are. And that's what we did. We stayed, and they ran away, and we stayed in camp. And she was the one that told me. Because they were taking out the people from the camp and killing them on the way to Germany. So it's just a matter of, I was lucky, it meant for me to live through the war, I guess.
They called it the walking march.
Yeah.
March.
So,
So you were liberated from Częstochowa.
in
Yeah.
Częstochow, 1945, January 16th. And when we got out of camp, so we were hungry for sugar. We didn't have any sugar. So, and Sylvia and I told you that story?
Yeah.
So we went out on camp, and there was a big warehouse with vodkas, with chocolate, with everything you can name it. The German had it there. What did we take? Sugar. We took 100 kilo sugar, the two of us. And we dragged it out of that. To take vodka, we sold it to the Russians. Got a fortune for it. But we didn't do that. We were so hungry for that sugar that we couldn't care less about who cared about vodka. What are we going to do with vodka? Well, another thing, when I was liberated and came to Lodz with a group of girls, we got into a house, and the cabinet was as big as this one here, and it was full with money, with German money. But it was winter, it was January, it was cold. There was gorgeous furniture there. We didn't think to break up the furniture and burn it in the oven. But we took the money, we burned it. The next day we found out the money was good.
No, they
That
burned it. I told them because
I
they burned the money because they figured the Germans lost the war. The money is no good.
good. So the furniture we're going to use it. This one we cannot do. It was funny, yes. But
Millions
that's what we
and
did.
millions of dollars.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
think back for a minute over the time period that you were in camp,
yeah.
and think about just what you saw there.
What
You know,
I saw there.
I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of different things that you saw. Remember, you told me about the things that happened between mothers and daughters.
Oh yeah. In fact, I was with women. You know, we had women and men, but we were separated. You know, and I saw daughters take away the food from their mothers because they said, "You live long enough. I want to live." I saw it. They were fighting over a piece of bread. But we were lucky that, first of all, that I had that Mrs. Hoffman. She helped me. Second, we had Sylvia's sister, Bruchava. She used to, in the morning when we got the bread, she would take all our bread from us and then give us a half of a slice of bread. We got one slice of bread a day, I want you to know. Half of it she would give us in the morning, the other half she would put away. When we came back from work, she gave us the other half. And we worked sometimes 20 hours a day. We had 4 hours of sleep. And when we went to sleep already, they would have to call us to go out, and they would count us during the night. if we lay down.
What did you have on? What did you wear?
Nothing,
in camp?
nothing. I wore wooden shoes, the Hollander shoes. You know those Hollanderki we call them.
You know, I know what you're talking about. Now I
Yeah.
know why you never. I mean, I had them, but you always wondered why on earth anybody would
right.
choose to wear them.
Exactly. And I had a coat, what I still had from home, and I had a skirt and one blouse.
So you didn't have uniforms in camp?
No.
No, it was your own clothing.
Yeah, well, that's all I had.
No,
That's
no,
all
I-
my clothes. That's it. I washed it at night, put it on in the morning if it dried out. If not, I put it on wet. And we used to stay outside in the cold for. Sometimes they let us stay there 5-6 hours for no reason, just to punish us. And even I tell you, even like I had one time. This was in Skorzeczki, I'll never forget it. I was very, very tired. I worked 18 hours and I came back and they want us to go to take a shower. And I said, no, I'm not going. Well, because I said, I'm not going, they put me in a bunker.
A bunker.
A bunker, you know. And the rats were running around and I hung on the what do you call
Rafters.
it? No,
Bars.
yeah, like a bar. I was hanging there for 24 hours. When I came out of there, my friend Lola came by me. She didn't recognize me. I became gray, completely gray, in 24 hours. That's what they did to us. Not just to me, to the others too.
It's hard to describe.
I mean, it's so many years ago. Sometimes, you know, things come back to me, but I forgot. I can't remember all of them. This is in my mind because I remember when I got gray.
Dad, talk about when the war broke out for you. When did you know? Did you know in advance that the war was coming? I mean, did you
Yeah.
know the Germans were coming?
We knew all along that you see the whole wide world. We were very, we read a lot of things and we knew, we had good information, specifically in the small towns, we had more than in the big towns, that the war was going to break out, that the Germans are going to take over Poland and everything else. But you take England, you take America, you take all of them, they didn't believe it. They were thinking like today with Saddam Hussein. I mean, listen, once a murderer is always a murderer. Once a thief is always a thief. But it gets in the world that people don't realize that. We knew the war was coming. The war came. It took them probably about a week because they come to the Vistula. And the Polish army was concentrating on the other side of the Vistula. They were thinking they're going to stop the Germans, which they had no chance whatsoever. So our area was full of Germans because the Polish army was on the other side. But they got around them anyway. And the same thing, they come in, the first thing they assembled all the Jews, the young ones, the old ones. You're right in the middle of town, everybody had to go there. But I'll tell you, my father, my family was not said, we said one thing, we're not going anyplace. We were hiding, we had a lot of friends, a lot of Gentile friends, because it was a rule, you know, like I say, a small town with old farmers around there and so far and so on, and a lot of forests. The biggest forests besides Russia were there in that area where I lived. And there was a lot of burns around that area because the land was tremendously good. In our whole area was 80% Germans. Because the Germans, even wherever they were, they occupied in Europe the best lands. They were the biggest farmers. And we were dealing, and we were, like I say, father was very close with them, even. My hiding, but my father said one thing, we are not going to any camps, we're not going any place. But then came in the end of, I think, the beginning of 42, when they took all the small towns, all the Jews from the small towns, from the Ghetto, you know, we were a little freer than the people in the big cities, and they put them all into a big town. So we all had to go to assemble to go to Kozienice. So we went all, and listen, we went, me and my father and the kids and all of them, we went in there on horse and buggy. But in our mind was that we're going to get out of there. We're not going to be in the ghetto because we had enough German friends that they said, if you're going to go in there, forget about your life, you're going to be dead, there's no doubt. The atrocities in those ghettos were unbelievable. They packed in 20, 30 people in one room. No food. You had, if you found peels of potatoes, you cooked in, I mean, you know. But make the story short that...
But how did you, wait, when you went to, they went to Kozienice, but you and Grandpa separate?
No, we were into Kozienice.
Yeah.
I was in the ghetto maybe 4 or 5 hours. Then my father had already organized a group because there was a German, his name was Meyer. He was the second, like a vice president, he was the second man in command from to the Baron. The Baron was Polish, a Polish nobleman. But this guy, Meyer, was like the manager of the estate, you know, of the lands. I mean, they had working 6,000 to 7,000 people, you know. They were all living around there. He was very close with father, with my grandfather, because we were dealing before the war. And he said to father, when you get into the ghetto, I'll be waiting for you outside, because he couldn't get in, and I'll take the whole of your family, and I'll hide you. I'll do whatever I can to hide you. So that's what happened. I was in the ghetto a few hours, and father had organized that we are going to walk in those fields, like my wife did. You dig ditches and you cover them up, you open them up and cover them up. But we walked in the fields for quite a while. Father organized that he took out. You see, he as a German could go to the German government and say, I need 300, 500 Jews to walk in the fields. Mm-hmm. They allowed him. So we got out there 300 people, but mother could not go because they did not, because why? We had 3 little kids. So my younger little brother, he was 8 years old, 7 years old, he went with us. And I remember mother come over to the horse and buggy, because then when they already assembled those people, then the wagons came into the ghetto. And this was my remembrance. My worst moment of my life. And the kids were standing. And Mom, she says, I hope I'm going to see you again. And I have never seen her again. She kissed me and hugged me. And the kids too. Two little ones. On account of them, she couldn't go. And she says, I'm going to stay with the kids. Whatever's going to happen to all the Jews, it's going to happen to me too. But my father was very aggressive. He had the connections. We went out to that field walk. We were there 300 people. We were there a few months. Then all of a sudden, then this was another tragedy when they took away the ghetto after Yom Kippur. They rounded up the ghetto. And that Meyer used to tell father, he says, you hide here, you don't go anyplace. And he told us, after they took away the ghetto, father was crying, because why? And I too. Because my little brother, the 8-year-old one, Schulke, went back. Mother was sending letters. And because father was going back and forth. Because we didn't look like Jews, you know. And, you know, I had white blonde hair and so forth. So we were, as long as I was safe for one reason, because the Germans did not know who we are. The only way, I was always afraid if any of my friends, which I went to school with, or, you know, from the city, that they can recognize me, and they were bad. They were so bad, it's unbelievable. Whenever they believe me, there could have been hundreds of thousands of Jews being alive, specifically my age or older age. But a lot of those people just were hunting for a Jew like they were hunting for an animal. And then the Germans put out, you bring a Jew, you get 100 kilo of sugar or something, whatever. So I went out there to work, and then within a few months, and after a few months, that mayor, that He was a German, he was a SS. And he told us that next week they're coming to pick us all up. We're going to go to Treblinka. In the meantime, from the ghetto, but they all went to Treblinka, you know. Two sets of brothers. When they walked into the camp, listen, they were thinking what to do. They were young boys. And they saw the piles of clothing laying, you understand. They start fearing God that they lied because they told them they're going to take a shower, you know. The shower was the gas chambers. And they come and they were there in the forests around. And Father somehow got out of the forest and and they came to us, to that working place. And they told us they saw Mom holding the two little kids. You know, that because when they were hiding and then they were going out to see what happened, and they were lucky to get out of there, okay? And they come to tell us what Treblinka is all about. So we got very close with them. And when the manager from the Baron, the German, told us that they're coming next week, he says, you guys tell your closest friends to escape. Run whatever you guys can, because you're going to Treblinka, you're going to be dead. My father, he says, don't quote anything, because you know I can be in trouble. To make the story short, he set us up by a walker, you understand, from that Baron's I mean, they were walking in the fields, and they were walking, cleaning his, whatever. We were there, you saw the big palace where he lived. And he gave us to one guy but was close worker for him, you know. And we got to that Polish family. And there we were, hidden for about a year. Then we moved around someplace else. When we heard somebody is coming to the little village, I mean the SS is coming. So we had bunkers, you saw the bunkers, where where the cows were standing, you know, were dripping on us, you know, and everything else. But in the bottom, and we had a bunker to go out to a big tree, maybe 10 times as big as this one outside, that if something happens, we're going to run into the fields, you know. And I would say that my father was very courageous, knew how to handle things. And we had, because what did the Jews have with them? You took some gold with you, or some didn't have anything. So we all lived whatever we had. But we had quite a few pieces of gold pieces. So we gave those people, I mean the gold pieces, I mean we were going to that mayor, to the German. We gave him a couple gold pieces, and he was sending us every month, every 2 months, food. He took a big risk. And he told those people, because those people, there were times that I overheard, we were 8 of us hidden over there, that they wanna poison us. Because their life was, because it was happening around, if this neighbor of yours over here, if they found out you there, they burned down the house, they killed the family, everybody was burned right in that house. So everybody was wiped out. Whoever knew, maybe sometimes they killed 30 people at one time. So people they were trying to talk about, I overheard, so I come in and I said to their dad, I overheard, there was about 20 of the family, every Sunday they got together. Just overheard that they're going to put in poison or whatever. I says, I'm not going to eat no more. So when the guy what we were hidden by, if he was bringing in the morning, every morning, the food, you know, boiled potato, I mean cooked potatoes, you know, in water, whatever it was. So when he come in, I didn't listen to that. I says, you know what? His name was Yuzhak. I says, I want you to eat first. He says, why? I says, I'm not going to eat until you're going to eat first. So then Father told him, he says, listen, this would be overheard. Oh, he says, some of my talk, but that's not true. From then on, whoever brought in the food had to eat first. Listen, they were thinking to do all kind of things. And then in 1944, I was liberated quite a few months before the concentration camps. Because that area, the Germans evacuated everybody about 5-6 kilometers from the Vistula. The Russians were already coming because they were already, Stalingrad, and then they took Kiev, and they were already coming to the Vistula. And the Germans were already moving back. So we went, so father made this, he says, you know what, we better go with the Germans, because if we're going to stay here, and somebody's going to find us, they're going to kill us. Because who knows, because the Germans were all around there, this was the front line. And they said, from the front line, you got to move back 5-6 kilometers. So we put on those Polish hats. I remember I put it the one on. Was I don't know, it was spring, I think, already. And we took a cow in our hands, but, because they all had the wagons and the horses and the pigs and everything, So I took a cow by the horns, and father, and a rope, and we were going with the cows together with the Poles. And then father was sharp too that time. The two sets of brothers did not want to go. They hide themselves. There was a basement there with potatoes, and they hide themselves in the basement. And if you think they lived through the war, no. One day before, the Germans found them. Didn't kill them as Jews. They killed them as spies. We came back a week later, they were still laying there, and we buried them. But father says, we have no choice, we got to go. But how sharp he was. Some of the Poles that were going with us with the cows, and we assembled in one place, and everybody was sitting there, because the cannons were flying all over, so the Germans set us up there, and all the Germans were around us. So father saw some of them which he knew, and they knew us. He went up there to them and said, let me tell you something, you don't open your mouth, because there's 1,000 partisans around here. It wasn't true. And they were all scared, because otherwise he says, if you open your mouth, there's going to be a shooting all the way, because the partisans are right around here. The truth was, there was some partisans around there, there's no doubt. Because we ourselves had pistols and grenades around us. I mean, always carried with us. And then the Russians came in, because this was a couple of days, and the third day the Russians came in. We were liberated from the Russians in 1944. And then I was with the Russians.
Tell me the story about the gold in your shoe, though. There's a story. It was further back in the story.
Yes, I was when I was in that working camp. Mm-hmm. I had gold put in my heels, a few pieces in each heel, and I had a boyfriend. How can you not trust a boyfriend? I mean, the closest boyfriend. And I trust him, and I told him, you know what, because he was always crying, he hasn't got this, he hasn't got this. I said, listen, don't worry, you're going to go with us. Because his mother, they all went to Treblinka, so he didn't have anybody left. His sister was outside. She met a Polish boy, and she was with him. We knew about her. She used to come there sometime once a week to see him. But she didn't have nothing either. So I said to him, you know what, I have a few pieces of gold I had boots, It was winter, And we were sleeping on the hay, because why? I had a privilege, from the Baron. I mean, as a few friends, we slept on the hay. We didn't have to sleep in the barracks. And father too, because if something happens, we jumped out, and we could run into the forest. I get up in the morning, he is not there, and I haven't got my boots. He took the boots and disappeared, so I didn't have anything. And I was really, when I came, I didn't want to tell father that this happened to me. I just said to him that my boots were stolen. He did, if he knew or not, I don't think if he knew, because mom put it in there, you see. And this was eating me up because why, you always figured you got something. But listen, we somehow, to tell you about the survival, I used to go at night out to father's friends, and the only time I could go when it was 15 inches of snow, you understand, or it was ice cold or whatever. Because in daytime, forget it. Like I say, in daytime we were afraid that somebody's going to see me from close friends.